All right, we're breaking into our regular programming to take you to the Lebanese capital, Beirut, where we have reports of somebody being killed and gunfire. Of course, this comes after a day in which crowds have been gathering to protest, asking for the removal of a judge related to that case where they were investigating the Beirut Port explosions. Let's go now, I believe, to Zaina Khudr. Our reporter is standing by live for us in the Lebanese capital. Zaina, what can you tell us at this point?
Well, a lot of tension in the streets. Just look around. The streets are now empty. 2 hours ago, when the protests began, the protest that you mentioned, which was called for by Shia political parties against the lead judge in the investigation into the Beirut Port explosion, we kept repeatedly hearing bursts of gunfire. A few minutes ago, we heard 2 loud explosions, which were likely RPGs, and they were fired in the air. Now, the area in front of us is a front line. The army, the security forces have cordoned off the area around Tayyoune. Now, Tayyoune is a neighborhood in Beirut, which was really a front line during the civil war, which ended in 1990. And it still remains a front line between 2 opposing political factions. One of them is the Amal movement, one of the Shia parties, which actually called for the protest today, and the Christian Lebanese Forces Party. You can see ambulances in the street. Sami, you mentioned that 1 person has been killed and up to 8 people injured. This is what we understand from hospital sources. If Ali, just get out of the way for the car. People are afraid. They are leaving their work, picking up their children from school. There's a lot of panic in the street because this is a country that really has been on the edge, further divided. As you can see here, parents picking up their children from school. People are really afraid. شو في تحت؟ في شيء تحت؟ He's saying that there's a lot of gunfire near the school and they were firing RPGs, and he's saying there are a lot of dead and injured. Again, we cannot confirm this, but what we do know from hospital sources is that 1 person is dead and 8 people are injured. The source of the gunfire is not known, but as you can imagine, both sides are now blaming each other for starting this clash. Lebanon is a country that has seen confrontations in the past. There has never really been peace and stability since the end of the civil war in 1990. But like I said, the issue of the investigation into the Beirut Port explosion has really divided this country and polarized this country even further.
All right, Zaina, let me ask, I mean, a situation like this, of course, things are not always immediately very clear, but it's important for us to try and be a little bit as forensic as possible as we can to try and paint the picture and an understanding of what's going on. So first of all, when you said an RPG, that's of course a rocket-propelled grenade, usually an anti-tank weapon, was fired. Do we have any idea who was firing?
It's hard to say.
Right.
We've been asking the army, the internal security forces here. They are saying that they don't know the source of the gunfire. They don't know who's firing the RPG. But
right.
I can tell you.
Let me ask this question, yes, Zaina.
Parties.
Is the idea that somebody was firing at the protesters who've been gathering in Beirut today? Were they the target? Is that what it appears is going on?
We're getting conflicting reports. An army official was quoted as saying that there was a sniper that fired into a crowd of army soldiers. Other reports suggest that they fired towards protesters. As you can imagine, the situation is very fluid right now. People are panicking. They're heading home. We haven't been able to confirm even, where exactly that sniper was. They're saying that the sniper was in Tayyoune. And in fact, many people here are telling us, don't go down that road, don't go down the road. There are a lot of snipers there. There's just a lot of tension here. And this issue over the port blast has divided this country. Yesterday, we heard the opposition accuse Hezbollah and Amal, the Shia political groups that called for the demonstration today, of carrying out a coup, of carrying out a coup against the state, a coup against the judiciary, and to really impose its will on the Lebanese people with the threat of arms. And in fact, Hezbollah and Amal, they have been warning of civil strife if the investigation continues according to its path. So right now, it's very hard to see how a compromise can be reached. In the past, when we have been in situations like this, some sort of a compromise is reached between the different political... You can still hear the bursts of gunfire. Yeah, and that was another louder explosion. That most likely was a rocket-propelled grenade, Sammy, the RPG that we talked about earlier. So if you can see the army, heavy security deployment in the streets. They are directing traffic, making sure that people do not drive towards Tayyoune, the area of Tayyoune, like I mentioned, that has long been a front line. In fact, last night, we understand, there was tension there. There was tension when supporters of the different political parties were in the streets. Yes, it's dangerous times. This is a dangerous escalation in the situation. And Lebanon, it's not just an escalation on the streets, there's also political escalation. There is a real possibility of political paralysis. Just last month, a new government was formed after 13 months of deadlock. And now Amal and Hezbollah are threatening to quit the cabinet if Judge Tarek Bitar is not removed. And I think I have to mention why they are insisting that Judge Bitar is dismissed. They say that he is politicized and that he is going after specific individuals. Now, Judge Bitar, this investigation is secret. He has not answered to those claims, but supporters of Bitar, who include, I must mention, the families of the victims of the Beirut Port explosion, believe that he is doing the right thing, that he is on the right path, and that he is one of the rare judges who is not politically affiliated, because in this country, the judiciary is accused of not being politically independent.
Okay,
so
Zaina, let me jump in and ask you what's going on around you there. First of all, just to clarify, are you close to the area where the demonstrations were taking place?
Yes, let me show you, if we could just walk this way. To our right was where the demonstration was taking place. That's the Justice Palace. To our left, just a few hundred meters from here, is Tayyoune, where we understand the people were shot at by a sniper. Again, this hasn't been confirmed. According to an army official, we are trying to confirm exactly what happened. And that is why people are avoiding driving down towards Tayyoune, because what we just heard an RPG being fired a short while ago.
Okay, so Zaina, let me then jump in and ask this.
This is a city on edge.
So clearly there was a demonstration further down that road to the right, and we've got reports of shootings happening also further down to that road, but on the left. And behind you, we could see soldiers stopping people. One assumes that this is a security fan-out operation, and soldiers now trying to control this whole area where there's demonstrations and reports of shooting going on.
Yes, but I must mention the protesters have since left the area approximately an hour and a half ago after the repeated bursts of gunfire. And there you hear another loud explosion. It seems this is not just only automatic rifles that are being used, but rocket-propelled grenades as well. People, maybe we can ask somebody coming from that direction to give us more information. It is quite difficult now to venture down that road without knowing the lay of the land at this point in time. وين كنت أنت؟ مش حد تايوني إيه؟ أنت شو عم تسمع؟ يعني people are worried. They're hearing gunfire. They don't know what is going on. Sorry, عفواً. We're going to try to find out, Sammy, what is happening down that road, to see whether or not maybe we can approach the ambulance. Let's go down that road. Yes, Sammy.
Just to put it in context, Zaina, the protesters today.
We're in open air. We should be on the right. Yes.
We can hear the gunfire going on.
Yes, Sammy. Yes.
I'm just pausing for a second to let us take in the sounds that we can hear. But yeah, I was saying the protesters today, they were supporters of Hezbollah and Amal, two predominantly Shiite groups, which want to see this judge step down, right? Those were the protesters who were on the streets. Did we have any rival demonstrators from people who want to see the judge stay in his position?
Not today, Sami, not today. But over the past year or so, since that port explosion, the families of the victims, as well as other Lebanese, have been taking to the streets, demanding justice, demanding accountability. It has been a troubled investigation since the start. Judge Bitar, is the second judge to have been appointed. The first judge was also removed by the political class. Really, the standoff between the establishment and Bitar began in July, when he started summoning former and current ministers to be questioned, and he wanted to question them as suspects. They are being accused of criminal negligence. He says that there is evidence that they were aware of the ammonium nitrate in warehouse 12 being stored unsafely with flammable materials, and they did nothing about it. They did not do their jobs, so they were criminally neglected. But those politicians, these former ministers, refused to show up for questioning. And every time, at the beginning, they had parliamentary immunity, but 2 weeks ago, Parliament was in recess, so they lost their immunity. And Bitar, the judge, tried to take advantage of this situation to call them in for questioning. So they're refusing to cooperate, the establishment, and Amal and Hezbollah want him to be dismissed. And those in the opposition, groups like the Christian Lebanese Forces, which really, their stronghold is in Tayyoune, facing Amal, and they have really been accused by some of Amal's supporters of deploying those snipers, support Judge Bitar. And in fact, the leader of the Christian Lebanese Forces party said last night, Samir Jaja, he did say that Hezbollah cannot impose its will on us, that eventually, if they take to the streets, we too can take to the streets. So there was really a lot of tension in the run-up to today's protest. And the political divide, it has been in place for years now. So it just takes an incident for a confrontation or a clash to happen. So as you can see, tension in the streets. We are trying to confirm the source, who was the source of gunfire. It's still not clear.
Zaina, as you're talking, let me point out for viewers, we've got pictures on the right side of the screen you may not be able to see, but we had pictures there of what looked like army APCs being deployed. Do you get a feeling that the army is now in control of the streets?
To a certain extent, but still, what I told you, the front line is still unclear, because we're still hearing bursts of automatic gunfire. But we're getting some reports that the army is saying that the army, on how the violence began. Protesters were heading to Beirut's Justice Palace, where they were shot at. So according to this line, the protesters were shot at in the area of Tayyoune Badaro, that front line that I keep on mentioning, that fault line between the Christian Lebanese Forces Party and the Shia Amal Party. And the army moved in to cordon off the area and arrest the shooters. It's a fluid situation. The army has been out in force. And as we know now, the latest in terms of casualties, 1 dead, 8 wounded in the Beirut rally that has been organized by Hezbollah. So a city on edge, Sami, a city on edge. I'm assuming that there will be behind-the-scenes contacts between the different political factions, because it is in no one's interest for the situation to descend into chaos. This could be an intimidating tactic on the part of these different political parties to ensure that their demands are met. it's too early to say. We can keep on speculating, but right now I can show you a lot of people are saying that we don't even know what's going on because we don't have electricity in our homes to watch television. The economy has all but collapsed. The state doesn't provide power for more than an hour or 2 hours a day, and more than 80% of the population is now poor, so they have no money to afford private generators. So the Lebanese people are tired. They've lived years. The past few years have been very difficult. Not only economic turmoil, political turmoil. A lot of people are telling you we're packing our bags and leaving because of the dire economic conditions. And I can tell you after this incident, a lot more will decide to leave this country. So what we understand, a sniper opens fire at protesters who were making their way to the Justice Palace. We're still waiting for more official statements from the different political factions, but right now this is what we have. But we are seeing a lot of video on social media of, men carrying weapons. It doesn't bode well, really, for the future of this country, which has had a turbulent and dark past. Every so often, there is bouts of violence that makes people have little faith. Let me try to ask these Sorry, وين كنت أنت؟ وين كنت؟ قدام وين يعني؟
طيون.
إيه شو عم بصير هونيك؟
هلا حاليا اجى الجيش.
في جيش كتير? Okay, he's saying that there's a lot of, sorry, I'm ترجم. There's a lot of army presence in the front line. شو كمان؟
هلا حاليا خلص كل العالم انسحبت وجا الجيش.
مين العالم سحبت؟ أنت شفت يعني مسلحين؟
مسلحين كثير.
He saw a lot of men, armed men in the streets. راحوا لوين؟ أبيوتون.
فينا نقول انه انسحبوا شوي لورا.
They pulled back from the front line. And انت شفت حدا مصاب? I'm asking him if he saw anyone injured or.
لا هو كان رصاص كلياته عم ينطلع على البنايات وبالهواء.
Most of the gunfire, they were firing into the air. 3 or 4 RPGs were fired. We heard that, those loud explosions. طب انت شو بتحس كمواطن لبناني? I'm asking him how does he feel as a Lebanese citizen right now?
Perhaps it might be interesting to ask him if he saw who was actually doing the shooting. Were they rival protesters, or is he referring to army personnel?
No, not the army personnel. He was talking about armed men. مين كان عم بيقوس؟
اللي كان عم يقوس اهل المنطقه هونيك معروفين لمين منتمين لحركه امل. حزب الله ما كان بعد هذا عم يقوس. حزب الله كان منتشر هون. اللي كان عم يقوسوا كلهم من جماعه حركه امل مش من حزب الله. انا مع اثنين.
He's saying, I don't support anybody because in this country, almost everybody is politicized. He's saying that there were armed men from the Shia Amal party. They were opening fire. But I'm asking him if the other side... And he's saying on the other side, people were grilling fish. Shukran ktir. It's very hard, Sami, to ask such a question to a Lebanese who mostly everybody belongs to or supports a certain political party. So it's very, we have to be careful because it's hard to say. Clearly, we don't know what happened. We are waiting for official statements from both sides. But what I can tell you is that that is a front line, a very known front line. Every time there's a political crisis in this country, every time there's bouts of violence, it happens there. And that's when the army is always deployed. Now, he said the army is deployed, so I think we may be able to approach the area now. انت جاي من فوق بطل في مسلحين وهيك؟
لا بعد بس نحن هربنا.
انت هربتي؟
هربنا انا هلا بدي اطلع على البيت ماني عارفه وين بدي اروح.
She ran away. She wants to head home, but she doesn't know which way, how she's going to be able to get home, which road to take. Okay? Yeah, people. Yeah, فيك تطلع. You can go that way. Yeah, فيك تطلع من هونيك. So, the Lebanese are just concerned. They're confused. They don't know what is happening. Well,
Zaina,
in a way they do. These are
let's put into context
round of violence.
Let's put into context then what we've learned so far, because I think the narrative has developed over the last 20 minutes that we've been on air talking about this. So there was obviously a demonstration going on. There was a procession of it trying to reach the presidential palace. And then we've had reports of some armed guys shooting, right? And the result of this is 1 person's killed, 8 people have been wounded, and the demonstration has been dispersed.
The demonstration has been dispersed approximately 2 hours ago. They were outside the Justice Palace protesting against the lead judge investigating the Beirut Port explosion, demanding that he be dismissed. Now, the Lebanese Army has just issued a statement saying that they will shoot at any armed person on the street, shooting from any place, and that they have asked the people to leave the streets and to leave near the site of the clashes. Now, that's exactly where we are, near the site of the clashes. We are approaching slowly because clearly we do not know what is up ahead. We are going to stay on our side in case that they continue firing rocket-propelled grenades, which at least 3 have been fired over the past hour. So the army now issuing this terse statement saying that they will fire back. The army is in a very, very difficult position. I think it's very important to talk about the role of the army in Lebanon. This is the only institution which is seen to a certain extent as neutral, standing really on the sidelines every time there is a political conflict, because the army is made up of the different sects in this country. And if the army does side with one political party against another, then the risk is it will split, which happened really during the civil war in the 1980s when the army split. So this is where the danger is. Right now, it is the Lebanese army, which is the only one keeping this country. شو كان عم بيصير؟ عن جد؟ مين هن؟ اوكي. طيب في جيش كثير فوق؟
بس انتبهوا في طقنيس.
Okay. So basically they're advising us not to venture any further because there are a lot of snipers on rooftops. They're saying also that the Lebanese army has a heavy presence in the area.
Zaina, do we need to let you go to take cover? It seemed those guys in the car were warning you that there is snipers close to you. I'm a bit concerned.
Yes, they told us not to venture. Sorry, وين كنت أنت؟ تيوني. شو الوضع هلا؟ في بعد أنس فوق؟
هلا اشتباكات غير مباشرة من بناية لبناية.
It's still, they haven't contained the situation yet. He is saying that the army is in the middle and there's still sniper fire. صح؟ أنت بتحكي English?
From Shiyah to Ain Rumana and from Ain Rumana to
Yeah, Shiyah is a neighborhood, the stronghold of Amal, and Ain Rumani is a stronghold of the Christian Lebanese Forces Party. أنت يعني you're a Sahafi, right? You're a journalist. Are you shocked that this is happening today, or you expected this?
يعني من لما خلقت أنا هذا المشهد.
He said since he was born, it's the same scene he's seen over and over again. And this is what we've been trying to say. This country has not seen stability and security. The war, the civil war ended, 30 years ago now. But this is continuous.
Yes.
The different political parties, the different leaders today were former warlords. And the struggle for power really continues. And the Lebanese people are trapped in the middle. Thank you, thank you. And we will try to see, there's their army. Maybe we can ask them whether or not we can.
To you and our viewers, we're now hearing from hospital sources that 2 people have been killed.
You don't think so? Why? Okay, the army does not speak to journalists. He's also intelligence. They will not speak to us. They're not allowed to speak to reporters. So, as you heard that journalist, it's a scene that the Lebanese people have seen over and over again. Streets are empty. Everyone is back home, worried about what happens next. In a country where the economy has all but collapsed. In a country where the currency has collapsed, losing 90% of its value over the past 2 years. The government should be meeting. The government should be, it's a bit open space here, Ali. We should walk ahead for the walls. So the currency has lost its value. People's minimum wage now worthless. People's deposits are also trapped in banks because banks are unable to or are refusing to give their depositors back their money. So this country has many, many problems, and now the government is paralyzed. They were supposed to begin negotiations with the International Monetary Fund for a bailout package. That has not begun. So until this issue of the investigation let's just walk here so that we're next to the wall.
Zaina, let's come back if we can to what's going on now, and that journalist you were talking to, from what we could gather from that conversation, there seems to be an indication of exchange of fire between two different neighborhoods going on, or buildings in two different neighborhoods, a Shia, which is a predominantly Shiite Muslim neighborhood, and Ain al-Ramana, which is predominantly Lebanese Christian forces neighborhood, right? I mean, if that's the picture, how worrying and disturbing is that? Because does that not bring our memories back to the Lebanese Civil War exchanges of fire in 1975?
True. This was the front line in 1975 when the Civil War broke out. And at times, and this is not the first time that there has been violence along this fault line since the end of the war in 1990. These are two political parties, but longtime enemies. The leaders of both of these political parties were former warlords during the war. And clearly, the divide is deep. There's sectarian tensions in this country. You heard the man. We've seen this time and time again, he says. He's not shocked. Possibly we'll wake up tomorrow morning as if nothing happened. The leaders will sit together on the table, call each other behind the scenes, and reach some sort of a solution to the latest crisis. And life goes on. Instead of solving the core problem in this country, which is the lack of national unity and the lack of national reconciliation between the people, which allows these politicians and leaders of political parties to exploit those grievances in order to remain in power. We have to remember 2 years ago, there was a protest movement, a non-sectarian mass protest movement nationwide. I'm just asking them, في شي هون؟ هون لا؟ قدام شوي؟ Huh? At Tayyoune. Okay, we're going to keep walking, Sammy. Sorry, but we just have to ask.
Sure.
So there was a protest
we
movement
appreciate you gathering information on the fly for us like this.
Yes, so there was this protest movement, which has largely fizzled out now, demanding a change in leadership, demanding new faces, because they blame the political class, which has been governing this country for 3 decades now, for really running the economy into the ground, blaming them for corruption, mismanagement. The state is nearly bankrupt. I think it's important to say that the state no longer has any foreign currency reserves to keep on importing fuel. You've seen scenes from Beirut over recent weeks of the fuel crisis, the long queues at gas stations. So the people of this country are dealing with daily struggles to put food on the table, to secure electricity, even hospitalization. People can no longer afford to pay for hospitalization fees because they're now so poor and their currency has lost value. So it seems they're still evacuating some wounded. We're going to go to the other side of the street because, Ali, I think we should be on the other side because, yeah. Yes, Sammy. So we are approaching the front line. Now you can see more.
Maybe explain to us, Zaina, now you've been walking in that direction for a little bit. Where exactly are you going? Are you heading towards the area between Shia and Ain al-Ramana, where apparently there were reports of exchange of fire?
Yes. You can still hear the bursts of automatic gunfire. Okay, that was a sniper. That's a sniper. We have to... Ali, come back here. Sorry. دول؟ لا. ليه وين مين؟
ربما
Okay, I'm just asking.
ربما
This is a sniper.
عمد الجيش اللبناني
Have to move back because
في الهواء قد يكون
sniper. So we have to move back a bit. Let's stay behind this wall, guys. So you can see. Come here. Okay, just stay here. What?
بسمع صوت جوني هونيك وعم يعمل انترفيرنس.
Okay, but...
So, Zaina, you're now literally very close to the area where we can actually not only believe, but where we can hear gunfire still being exchanged right now, correct?
Sniper fire, yes. Sniper fire, according to the Lebanese Army. That is what they told us now. That's why they told us to move back, because it's not clear where it is coming from. There are high buildings up ahead down this road. The front line, or what we can call that fault line, is just a few hundred meters in front of us. The Army, like I mentioned earlier, issued a statement saying that they're going to shoot at anybody who is armed. This will take a while to contain. This has happened in the past. It's not easy for the Army to move in, and you know, the Army has to be very careful not to be seen as taking sides. We talked about the Lebanese Army a while ago, before we spoke, I believe, to the journalist or to the Army personnel. They're in a very difficult position, because if they take any action against one political party instead of another, it really risks the Army's unity, which has happened in the past.
Zaina, let me ask you this. I know this is a very unclear. This is a very unclear and fluid situation, but the journalist in you still has to ask the question, even though I understand it's going to be difficult to sort it out. Do we have any idea who the snipers are shooting at if demonstrators have been dispersed?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. But if you ask the demonstrators, the protesters who belong to the Shia political groups Amal and Hezbollah, what they were telling us at the site of the demonstration earlier outside the Justice Palace, they were pointing the finger at the Lebanese forces, the Christian Lebanese forces. Of course, we cannot independently confirm this. The Army is saying that it was, you know, the shooting was carried out by snipers. This is according to the Army, like we mentioned earlier. And at least now we're getting reports that 2 people have been killed, not 1, and at least 20 injured. Now, we also know that all roads leading to Ain al-Rumani are now closed. What the Army is trying to do now before moving in is trying to isolate these 2 neighborhoods from each other, to actually push the armed men on both sides of the divide further back. This before they will be able to move in. So you can see people leaving the area. People, of course, are afraid. They're afraid whether or not tomorrow morning everything will go back to normal, or if indeed this will worsen, whether or not this will be contained. In the past, situations like this have been contained, but there's no saying. So now we are hearing from the Lebanese Red Cross. Lebanese Red Cross, 2 dead, 20 injured. So that's the casualty toll right now.
All right. All right, Zaina, we're going to let you take a break and take some cover here. I'm sure we're going to come back to you soon, but that's Zaina Khuda reporting to us on a very fluid and dangerous situation in Beirut, the Lebanese capital. 2 people reportedly killed, dozens more injured.